Morning everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm traveling from Victoria, BC down to Vancouver, Washington for a Lucky Logger history presentation by Pat Franco and Tyler Castle, and I thought I'd just bring you guys along for the ride. So I'm currently sitting in the ferry lineup for the Black Ball Coho ferry that's going to take me across to Port Angeles, and I've never taken this ferry route or driven any of these roads, so it should be fun. Anyways, hope you'll stay along for the ride.
Artlist.io. Music licensing reimagined. Artlist.io.
Okay, we made it here to Vancouver, Washington. I just got checked into my hotel. I'm staying at the Comfort Inn and pilfered a bunch of their ice for the beer, and we're gonna head over to the theater. Here we are at Kiggins Theater, downtown Vancouver, Washington. Check this out.
do that for a donation?
Okay, you got the party, I got the,
That's when you first said, I think that's for the beginning thing, for their first thing. I'd like to thank the Cascabrino Association, Cascabrino Association for putting up on the trivia there. Thanks, guys. With no further ado, Pat, tell everybody why you are interested in Lucky Lager.
So I grew up in California in the Bay Area, and of course Lucky started in San Francisco. And in the early 70s, my dad was a beer can collector. A lot of people collected beer cans in the 70s. And I was probably in high school, and my dad was collecting cans. I thought it was cool, but I thought, I'm gonna start collecting signs. And then one day we're just talking about beer, and I said, how come there's no Lucky signs? And my dad said to me, he goes, they obviously have signs, they sold a lot of beer, you just have to go find them. Well, we started joining different beer clubs, and we met a guy that worked at Lucky. And I kind of hit it off with him, and he was telling us a story, and for some reason I just fell in love with their logo, the X. And it's one of those things where every company has their logo, but the X is so unique and so unusual and so different where a product can be known by just their symbol. And everybody knew that the red X meant Lucky Lager. I thought that was kind of cool. I actually looked into it and found out that the X was a symbol for good luck.
That's great. And I was born into it. So my dad worked at General Brewing and Lucky Lager. And that's how it came to me. And growing up, my brothers and I were immersed in Lucky through the 70s. And a lot of people of my age remember those little stubby bottles and the puzzle caps and all that fun. So yeah, that's and then I came to collecting later. Been at it for probably 30 years, and through the CBA and meeting Pat, who was Mr. Lucky Lager, and as our time went, we kind of changed, and I went for more quantity than quality, and between the two of us, we probably had the Lucky. We know we have the largest Lucky Lager collection in the world. So we got thousands upon thousands of items. This is just a Saturday, and we can collect anything that's fun. I mean, it could be an envelope or whatever. So we're just preserving that history, and this is going to be a presentation kind of through the collector's eyes, and we'll do the best with the short time that we've got. So yeah, here we go.
So the one thing that you guys will see is we have a selection here of stuff. These are items from our collection. This is probably 1% of what we have. But we brought this here today because this kind of gives everyone a little idea of what Lucky did. If you see how many brand designs there are, how many logo changes, 100 different tap handles, what does that tell you? They sold a lot of beer, and they were very successful. Our collections cover from 1934 to Tyler's probably into the 90s. I kind of cut back to about 1970. Tyler's the Lucky new logo guy, I'm the old logo guy. So our story is going to tell you the story of the beginning of Lucky till the end. Well, I don't like to say the end, but we're going to tell you our story, and you guys are going to learn stuff that you probably didn't know about the brand. The first thing I'm going to start out with is the logo. Can you hold this, Tyler? So here's the Lucky Lager logo. This is the very first logo from 1934. If you look at the center of the X, it says bonded beer. If you look through some of these signs and bottles and cans, that logo changes a lot, but the one thing that's always there is age-dated. So Budweiser came out with Born on Date in 1993. It was the greatest thing. We date our beer, it's fresh. Guess what? Lucky did it 60 years before they did. Lucky was very innovative.
And throughout the thing, we'll show other innovations that they did. They were ahead of the game.
So let's talk about the very beginning. What you guys are gonna learn is there's little things you don't know that you're probably gonna be surprised about. The first thing is Lucky was one of the companies that did not brew beer before Prohibition. They were a turnkey, brand new operation that started as soon as Prohibition ended, 1933. Their first beer hit the market in 1934. Lucky was started by the grandson of Adolphus Busch. He had two grandsons. One of them was given money to start the Lone Star Brewery in Texas. The other was given money to start the Lucky Brewery in San Francisco. General Brewing Corporation. So they started in 1933, but the interesting thing about it is, can you go back to the screen, kind of? The interesting thing about it, one more. No, the other way, sorry. One more this way. So the Coast Breweries of Vancouver, BC, they were the biggest supporter of Lucky Lager. They gave San Francisco money to start the brewery. So they were a partner since day one. What this did was allow them to brew Lucky Lager in Canada at the same time. What some of you may know is the Star Brewery in Vancouver, which was in business before Prohibition, began an agreement to brew Lucky Lager in 1939. The Coast Breweries of Vancouver, BC also gave Star Brewing money after Prohibition for a startup. So Lucky is actually more connected to Canada than you would know. They also brought their products. Coast Breweries had a beer called Silver Springs, which they brewed in Vancouver by Star Brewing, Interstate Brewing. It was their secondary brand that came from Canada. So that's how Silver Springs got to Vancouver. So now that you know the history started in Canada, let's move forward. Some of these next slides will show you the early advertising from the early days. Go ahead, Tyler. As you can see, they had an ale also. These are from 1936. These are the earliest products they came out with. Here's a sign from the very beginning. One of the things they wanted to do was brew a really top premium beer. So what they did is they went to Germany and they hired a brewmaster from Germany. And they brought this brewmaster to San Francisco. They said, we want a world-class beer. So even from day one, they always said one of the world's really fine beers. They were really proud of their product.
And the product early on was different than what some of us had in 1970 when it went to Lucky Elk. It was not that swill down there.
So here's some other early signs. So as I stated before, go back one. So dated beer, you'll see how the logo changes. It was bonded beer and then dated beer. And these are icons of the brand that lets us know what era the signs are from. So these are early, like 1935 or 1936. Here's a real early sign from like 1935. Again, the X is so prominent in everything they did. The X was so iconic. You could go to a bar and they knew what you wanted if you said, give me an X. Here's another early sign. Again, the world's finest beers. Lucky Ale.
And talk about how prolific they were on tap too. I mean,
Well, this is early on, but one thing I can tell you about Lucky is like their brewery like doubled in size every year for the first 10 years. Their capacity doubled every year. And by the 50s, they had like draft beer accounts and like there wasn't a bar in California where you couldn't get Lucky. They owned the draft business. So you'll see a lot of signs that say on tap or on draft. Now this sign is a Lucky Bubbler. This is like one of the true, most iconic Lucky signs you'll ever see. They're very popular with collectors because they're really hard to find and they're really hard to get parts for. If you break it, you can't fix it. And Lucky was the only brewery on the West Coast that had bubblers. So they made hundreds of these. And if you had a good account, you would get one. Let's talk about Interstate. Here's the Vancouver story where it started. So here's our brewery in 1939. You notice it says Lucky Lager on the roof. But from 1939 to 1949, Interstate Brewery was formed, and Lucky Lager did not own the Interstate Brewery. They merely contracted to brew Lucky Lager in 1939. Well, in 1939, the Star Brewery also had a beer called Hop Gold. A lot of you remember that. It's pre-Lucky Lager was Hop Gold. Well, in 1939, they introduced Lucky Lager and Interstate. They changed the name from Star to Interstate because now they're selling Lucky. By 1940, Lucky was so popular that they no longer sold Hop Gold. So their flagship brand was gone. So the next photos you'll see will be signs from the Interstate era. Now when I say Interstate era, their logo is kind of this round logo, where you've seen the previous signs are kind of square, and the Vancouver logo is always circular with this kind of a single stroke X, and it's very appealing to, it's the same in all their stuff, but when you see their signs, they're different than the ones you see in California.
Yeah, and as collectors, we recognize certain colors and certain patterns and stuff that like, oh, that's distinctly Interstate Brewing in Vancouver Brewing.
So again, see the round circular logo, and their color scheme is kind of like silver, black, red. You'll see this sign right here is kind of black. If you look at most of the Lucky signs are blue, yellow, red. The black is Vancouver. Here's another example of that. These signs were all made between 1939 and 49, and they're super impossible to find.
These are all from past collection. He's got some of the most amazing, there's only one around type stuff too.
This sign is like so industrial, it's actually right here in the front. This sign was made in Portland. It almost looks like it was made in metal shop. It's very simple, but very old and unique and really hard to find. So we go back to Canada again. So the Coast Breweries in Vancouver made Banker's Ale. That was one of their products. They brought to Vancouver in 1940. These are examples of Banker's Ale that was brewed in Vancouver. This is the sign that's down in the front. It says, by every test, aged beer is best. Their biggest selling point was they would not sell beer that wasn't fresh. So when you bought a Lucky Lager, the date it was brewed was on the bottom of the can or on the label. Here's another Vancouver sign. This is a license plate holder that you put in your tavern to put your liquor license. This is a few different business cards from different distributors. And a lot of these cards I got from former employees over the years where I met them and they're like, oh, Dad had this or Grandpa had this. This business card right here, any of you guys that are here that worked for Lucky, that was a mural that was in the brewery that on the bottom of that business card. So I never saw it, but I'm sure there's people here that may have seen it. Here's another example of early advertising from the 40s. This sign has a very unusual story. I got this sign about 3 years ago, and someone had saw it in a shop, and it was literally like 10 miles from Canada, and I got in the car and drove halfway to Canada and spent the night and bought it the next morning.
It's the only one.
It's the only one, yeah. And it's a strange slogan. Here's luck with Lucky Lager. We've never seen that on anything else except one foam scraper. So it's a very, very odd slogan that they're making. This is, go ahead, you want to talk about this, Tyler?
Yeah, so again, one distinct thing about the Vancouver brewing and this era with Interstate, the X is often kind of slanted a little bit more. You'll notice in like this box here, for example,
It's almost like it's squished.
Yep. And so that's another indication. It's not just because the box is a little tiny, but we'll see that. And then again, the black ink is a lot more prevalent than the Interstate stuff.
So if you look at these two six-packs, the one on the left is Vancouver, the one on the right is San Francisco. So that shows you how distinctly different the X is. This is a good story. So these three cans right here are the only three Lucky cans they made by the Interstate Brewery in Vancouver. Not the only three cans, but the only three variations. So the can on the top says aged mellow beer. And I told you guys that they had an agreement from 1939 to 1949 to brew Lucky Lager in Vancouver. This aged mellow beer can came out in 1949, and that's right when Lucky bought Interstate. So in 1949 it became Lucky Lager Brewing. and the Age Mellow slogan was gone, but this can was only around for literally months. This can is very, very desirable, very difficult to find. This can came from a friend of mine who got it from a brewery employee who took it off the line, but like right when they made it, first batch. So terrific can, very difficult to find. Here's another example of the Vancouver cases. The one on the top left is not Vancouver, the rest are. So again, the black and red is prominent. All right, that's the end of the interstate era for Vancouver. Now we're going to move on to 1950. So by 1950, Lucky Lager became the largest selling beer in the West. It was the #1 selling beer in the 13 Western states. So like all other breweries, they needed to expand. In 1950, they opened the newest, most modern brewery in Southern California. This was the first 1 million barrel brewery in America. But what happened is shortly after, Budweiser, Schlitz, and Pabst all came to Los Angeles. Lucky was there first. But what happened is, more competition, we'll see what happens. So, here's the history. 1949 to 1959. Interstate Brewery becomes Lucky Lager Brewing Company. The Azusa Brewery opens in 1950 in Southern California. Again, they wanted to be the biggest beer in the West, so in 1957, they purchased the Fisher Brewery in Salt Lake City, Utah. So now Lucky had 4 breweries. And Vancouver was always the smallest brewery of the 4, but guess what? It lasted the longest. Here's an example of a sign that they would give to a distributor. This would be a big sign on the building. There's a lot of these around, but try buying one. Nobody wants to sell them when they have them, so it's a very cool sign. Here's a cash register size version of the same sign. Again, one of the world's finest beers. They've used that slogan forever. Here's an example of some neon signs that would be found on Route 66. These signs were only made for Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. Early 50s porcelain signs. You'd be driving in Phoenix and you'd see these signs along the highway. So let's talk about the gold border. This is like the most iconic neon Lucky made. Everybody wants this sign today. All the collectors like, give me a gold border, I want a gold border. Well, Tyler, how many different gold border signs did they make?
I think between you and I, we got 7 different variations, so we can 8.
So this sign, they would make it, at this time they were really doing well. They'd make a sign that would fit in your window. If you had a big window, they'd make you a big sign. If you had a small window, they'd make you a small sign. So we'll show you some examples of some of the signs they made.
And they come square, they come rectangle.
Here's a Cerveza Lucky, which is a Spanish version for Southern California. Here's a square on draft. This sign is very unusual. This sign showed up in a show in Seattle about 25 years ago, and the glass is striped. So if you look at the glass, there's stripes in the glass. It's a very unusual sign, very unusual process. And if you were to go to a neon shop or a neon, someone that does neon and they're really serious collector, they've never seen one. It's just that weird.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that we consider test signs, where there's just one of them. And often a sign maker may go to a brewer, for example, and say, hey, we want to make a sign. Here's a sign. And they're like, how much is it going to cost? Oh, yeah, that's too much. And then so there might only be one of those around. And Pat's got a lot of those one-offs. Which makes them incredibly unique and super that he stayed on.
So here's an example of, like I said, they had all these draft accounts, so it was very popular on tap signs in a lot of bars. This is a Vancouver sign too. So this sign is actually turquoise and pink. It's a bad picture, but it also comes in a pink and green version. And the pink and green version was California, and the turquoise was Northwest.
And it's really epitomizes the 50s. I mean, your turquoise T-bird pretty much. There's a lot of those colors come out in
Pastels.
And everything, yeah, pastel pinks and whatnot.
Here's another square sign. They probably made 10,000 of these signs. They used to show up everywhere. Now, everybody wants them. This is a very unique sign. So this sign has a good story. This sign was in a beer distributor in Port Angeles, Washington, since 1953. I found out about this sign about 25 years ago, and it took me 25 years to get it. This old Rainier distributor in Port Angeles had this sign and another one that said Olympia distributor. Both were up in the attic of this distributor, and they were there until about a year ago. And I finally found the right guy to make the deal, and I own this sign now. So pretty rare sign. This is a unique sign too. When Tyler was talking about the 50s, everything was pastel. All the neons were pink, green, light blue, baby blue, turquoise. This is a Vancouver sign. And what's unique about this sign, this is from about 1950, so right after Lucky bought Interstate. And this sign is really popular in California, but not on a frame. This is the only one I've ever seen that's on its original frame. And what's unique about it is on the transformer, it actually is stamped Lucky Lager Brewery in Vancouver, Washington. So anything that's got Vancouver on it, it's pretty special. Here's that pink and green version of the earlier sign. Now this is a Montana sign. Don't know why, but they made these small signs for Montana. This is like 1955. This is a bigger version. This is a really fun sign. Does anybody remember going into the local market and convenience store? They had the cooler doors with the... This sign was built to place on those doors. If you read what it says, everybody likes ice cold Lucky Lager. Please help by keeping this door closed. That told you to click the door shut so the beer would stay cold. How rare is it to find one of those? Now, Lucky did a tremendous job in California. You'll see there's going to be more signs coming up, but their initial, go back one. Their initial slogan was, "It's lucky when you live in California." So through time, through the 50s, they started getting different and they started saying, well, it's lucky when you live in the Northwest. It's lucky when you live in the West. By the end of the 50s, they were so popular, their slogan changed to, "It's lucky when you live in America." So the growth shows the growth of the brand. Favorite of the West. You'll see through some of the advertising, this is some of the reasons why we like Lucky is they did a little bit of everything. Fishing, hunting. Notice that, go back one. This is one of the coolest signs. It says, "Caution, deer crossing." It's smart advertising, but look at the deer. They're walking in the crosswalk. Pretty cool. Here's a crazy rodeo scene. Cowboys. Everyone says this guy looks like Ronald Reagan.
And if you notice, like the cow's bottom is cracked, and again, it's really, really rare to find 70, 80-year-old pieces like this that are still intact. And so, and these are series, often we'll look for the whole entire series of a collection and those variations. Even like cans or bottles, collectors will look like, if you're a can collector, you look for absolutely every variation. And there are hundreds of different Lucky Lager cans, literally hundreds. Because it may have only one city or two cities, or there's all these variations, and same thing with these signs.
So hold it here for 1 second. So these are called 3D signs. When the distributor brings this to your bar or your restaurant, they give you this sign, and in an envelope, you get the little cows. And the reason why you don't find the cows is because they get broken. But the idea was you put the sign on the wall, and then you put the cows off of the sign, so it looks like he's lassoing the cows. And there'd be a piece of string going to the cows. That's one of the unique ones, are all the parts on the sign. Go back one screen. So the fish, again, you take that fish and you put the fish on the wall, and there'd be a red piece of string going to the fish. This one, the deers are stuck on the glass, but those 3 deers up there go actually off of the sign too. So they're very cool, unique signs. And like Tyler said, it's so hard to find them with all the parts. And look, these signs are from like the early 50s, like in their heyday. This era right now is the 50s when they spent so much money on advertising. They were at the top of their game. They made all these great signs, and this is kind of one of the reasons why I like it. This sign is called a trolley sign, which trolley car signs were for buses, cable cars in San Francisco, streetcars in Los Angeles, Seattle. They made hundreds of them. There's so many different ones. But the artwork is so amazing. They did a great job. They really were proud of their product, and they made themes for anything you could think of. So this is some of the 50s plastic signs. And again, this is a wildlife series, so there's a bunch of these 3D signs with the duck, the pheasant, the fish. Very desirable. This one with the trout is like, there's only 2 of those known. I think Tyler has one, I don't. But it's a very rare sign, so if any of you guys have it, I'm looking for one. Here's a California girl. Everyone wanted California girls, right? It's lucky we live in America. They even made cheap signs.
And we haven't really talked about logo changes and whatnot as they were going. They went to this change of the logo, and as time went, the X shrank.
Yeah, we're going to get into that in the next segment, but yeah, as time goes by, you'll see that the X changes a lot, and it gets smaller and smaller in the packaging. Here's an example of their expansion. It's lucky when you live in Arizona. It's lucky when you live in Alaska. It's lucky when you live in California. Problem with these signs, if you want one, you got to go to Arizona to find one, or Alaska. So this sign, there's one down here. This is probably a poor version of it, but this is one of the most iconic Lucky signs. One of the world's finest beers. It kind of reminds you of history class when the teacher has the globe up on the desk, and just a cool piece of advertising. They did a lot of motion, a lot of different things. This is called a compass rose. Very popular sign. A lot of people have these. This again is another, this is the world kind of the same generation, 1950, when everything was more appealing to the eye, so they had to make it move to get your attention. But this is called the bubbling glass, the Pilsner glass. Pretty desirable sign. Again, Arizona, Hispanic. This is another story. So here's the sign where the baseball goes on the wall. This sign is when baseball came to California. The Dodgers and the Giants came to California in 1958. This sign, I believe, is for the California Angels.
Yeah, and Lucky's sponsored a lot of sporting events. They also sponsored the Portland Beavers baseball, and that's where their mascot got named Lucky. So you'll notice, like, hey, Lucky, the mascot of the Portland Beavers. It was because Lucky was part of the team from 45 to 50, and so everyone. I've got all of these, and this was just 1950, the last year that you'll see the Lucky Water X there. They did sports, sponsored lots of sporting events. They had a golf tournament they sponsored. And again, there's all kinds of neat stuff that like, oh, okay, and again, we'll collect anything. They sponsored a race team. This is all the races that this Porsche won in California. So, but the Lucky Portland Beavers thing is kind of a neat thing. So people get that history of why Lucky, the Portland Beavers mascot was named Lucky.
Yeah, and actually for about 10 years they were actually called the Portland Lucky Beavers. So here, this is the 1950s tray, but as you can see, it's still one of the world's finest beers. They were very proud of their product. Here's a 1940 sign with the age-dated logo.
Yeah, and they went from that dated beer to age-dated beer. There was that transition on their logo.
This is another really popular sign. Actually, when I told you I started collecting beer signs, 16 years old, this was the first Lucky sign my dad bought for me. So this sign goes back a long time. Here's an example of packaging. So this is, if you look over here, these are 1930, which is dated beer. Age-dated beer is about 1940, then here's a dated beer extra dry, which is late 30s. And then we move into the sign with the vertical lines on the can. So Lucky Lager didn't can beer during World War II. They made no beer from 1941 to 1947, I believe, in cans. This can came out in 1952. So it's newer, it's metallic, very, very thriving package. And then in 1955, they go to this logo, where Tyler and I call this the Chevron can, because they have chevrons on it. What's unique about this is 1955 is when the 16-ounce can was born. So this is the first example of a half-quart Lucky Lager. And they were one of the first breweries to have a 16-ounce can.
Yeah, again, innovating. And another thing that they might have innovated on and been rare is 7-ounce can. You know, making 7-ounce bottles.
Yeah, so the 7-ounce can.
Yep. You want just a little, just drink it from there you go.
So this is called a snack pack. You want a snack? So many people believe these cans were created for women because they can't finish a full beer. Theory, I don't know.
What he did, many beer makers did make beer during the war. They did make an olive draft can. I didn't bring one. They're pretty rare, but they made a can that was really plain. That was the only way you could, import it to export it to the troops. It was just a plain green can, like olive draft.
Army green.
Army green. I didn't bring one. They're a new can and rare.
Here's an example of the quart version of the Chevron can. These two are pretty rare. They're really hard to find in good shape.
I have the bright one, really, really ugly version, and I'll get past it.
So this, the can on the right, what's unique about these cans, they came in a 2-pack. And the way you open that can is you take the bottom of the can and you pop the lid off at the bottom of the can. Very unique. So this is like the holy grail of Lucky signs right here. Tyler touched on how sometimes the sign companies will make a sign and they'll design it and they'll bring it to the brewery, and the brewery will be like, that's fantastic, that's our new brand, look at that logo. Then they tell them the price. And they're like, no, we're not interested. So this is one of those signs. I got this sign. This was probably the hardest negotiation I ever made to get a sign. I've had this sign since probably 1987, and the guy I got it from, a guy walked into his shop and said, hey, anybody collecting signs here? I have a pretty cool sign. And he said, I worked for Lucky Lager in the 1950s, and I was the sign guy, and the sign company brought us this sign, but it was too expensive, so the brewery turned it down. But this is the only one they ever made, and the guy says, well, you can keep it. So I do own this sign. When people come to see my collection, this is the one sign they gotta see. They're like, where's the Baker's Ale sign? Very cool sign.
What's it cost?
Do you want to know what I paid for it? So, I don't know if you guys follow beer cans today, but beer cans nowadays, really rare ones, are selling for $20,000 a can. That sign right there is the first sign I paid $3,000 for. And that was almost 30 years ago. So I really wanted it. It was very, very, it was a war. It really was. And the guy I got it from, I'm still friends with. For some reason. So we'll back off one more. So let's talk about Baker's Ale. So Baker's Ale was a product, you saw the earlier one in the 40s that they made in Vancouver. This version of Baker's Ale was never sold in Vancouver or brewed in Vancouver. This one came out in 1959, and it was very awesome packaging. They tried to make it look like Rainier Ale, but as you know, Rainier Ale is a powerful brand, and it just didn't work. So this brand was gone by 1960. It had a 2-year run, but amazing packaging.
Here's a full one. I'm sure it's really, really good. Here's that old.
So this is the sign that represents the one from the 1940s, which is 15 cents a bottle.
And it's got that Vancouver, Canada influence there with that old burn type.
Here's all the Baker's Ale stuff. So here you can see the whole full realm of the packaging. Just an amazing packaging. So this is our next logo change. Now we're moving into the late 50s. This is about 1959. Now Lucky's made their logo smaller. The X is getting smaller. The age dated is getting smaller. But what they did is they added the hop leaves to the logo. And their packaging had Lucky Lager on both sides. I don't know why, but they decided to go to this format. And then their color scheme changed to more like It's kind of weird because it's pre-1960s, but it almost has a 60s feel with the turquoise, the yellow, and the white. Now, a lot of people that collect Lucky stuff don't like the turquoise era, but this is what happened. They went to this packaging like right around 1959. And here's an example of the cans. To the right, you see the logos from the early 60s. We'll get to that in a minute, but this is the packaging for 1959. So in 1960, another innovation, Lucky came out with a glass can. A glass can is a bottle that's the size of a can. So the idea was, some people call them hand grenades. The idea was you could fit more in your cooler, right? How big are bottles, right? They could fit in your refrigerator. Now think about how many here had a refrigerator in 1959? Some of you, right? How small were they? How small were the shelves? These bottles fit on the shelves in the refrigerator in 1959. So it was a big hit.
Innovation.
Other breweries started making them in 61, 62. This came out in 1960. Again, when Lucky did something with a new logo, they made a million signs. So they made signs for everything. Here, this is Lucky had a golf tournament in San Francisco called the Lucky International Tournament. This is advertising for that. If you look at this brochure, it says Lucky International Open. Gary Player won the first Lucky Open. Golf fans. Happy holidays. Again, these are the new logos. This is the late 50s, early 60s. Doesn't that make you thirsty? Now we're getting to another slogan. No finer beer, east or west. We get to the 60s and they start doing this psychedelic stuff, so there's a couple unappealing signs too.
A lot of outdoor stuff. I think that's big, like Shasta or something.
I think this is actually Utah. Fishing. This sign, okay. All right, so now we're at the end of the 50s. Things are changing for Lucky Lager. They just had the best run of their company. 4 breweries pouring out Lucky Lager all over the West. 1958, things start slowing down. You have Budweiser in California, you have Schlitz, you have Pabst, you have Falstaff, you have Hams. They're all in California now. Lucky owned that market. Now they got to deal with all these competitors. The affiliation with Coast Breweries in Canada ended in 1958. So they said, you know what, we're breaking off. Canada's going to be one. America's going to be their own. But what happened is 3 years later, Lucky really started seeing a slide, so they got embedded per se with Labatt's. So now Labatt's of Canada decides to purchase an interest in Lucky Lager to save the company. So in 1966, the brewery in LA, which is in Azusa, they sold that brewery to Miller. So now they're starting to feel the pain and the pressure in California. So they sell their most newest modern brewery to the competition. So now they not only have to deal with Pabst and Budweiser, now Miller's in California. So they kind of made their own bed. A year later, they closed the Salt Lake City brewery. So things were not good. Maybe the deal with Labatt's wasn't a good thing. In 1967, after they closed Azusa and Salt Lake City, they decided to change the name of the company. So it was Lucky Lager Brewing. Now Lucky Lager is not so popular, so now it's Lucky Breweries. That's their new name. So let's move forward. So this sign is right here. This is actually my favorite Lucky sign as far as neons go. It's from 1965, and it's again another new logo where they're taking the square logo and they're rounding it kind of like a TV screen. So we call this the TV screen logo. And then we also call this the turquoise era, because all the Lucky signs went to turquoise. So this is a 1965 Lucky sign, and this sign was only in the Vancouver market. So this sign wasn't available anywhere in the company but here. Here's the touch of Labatt's. So 1963, Labatt's came on board. It's the only time that the Lucky cans from Canada and the Lucky cans from America look the same. These Labatt's cans here, not to fool you, they're produced in Los Angeles. So these are some of the last beers they made before they closed the brewery in LA. This product was from 1963 to 1967, and it was pretty much a flop.
Yeah, there are actually some signs that cross over between Lucky and Labatt's, and there's a motion sign that we often find that you can peel back the Lucky sticker and it says Labatt's on it.
So what he's trying to say is this is the era where they started bleeding, they started losing their grip, and money was a factor, so they started recycling signs. So in the late 60s and 70s, you'll see a lot of the signs are recycled from other signs, which it showed you how cheap they were getting. This is a glass can from Hawaii. This is actually a really hard sign to find. They were popular in Hawaii too. And this is a transition. So this is, even though it says age-dated beer on this can is from about 1962. It's still a flat top can, so we haven't got to the pull tops yet. But look how much smaller the X is now. And the age-dated is just really small on the side. And guess what? They didn't age-date it anymore. So it kind of disappeared in 1964. And again, look how cheap the signs got. Plastic.
It's Pat's favorite. He loves these signs.
I don't have any.
Yeah, I get to observe all the really cheap ones.
So this sign, tell them about this sign. This is a very desirable sign.
Yeah, there's a series of these, but this sign is really popular to collectors for beer, but also at Chris Craft there. So there are just as many people who want that who own Chris Crafts or love Chris Crafts as the beer, if not more.
Those signs on eBay go for $500. And it was probably like a $25 sign in 1965. So here's an example of how they got more subtle with their advertising. Like, this is a Lucky sign that you can hardly tell. Right? Are they selling pickles or are they selling beer? This sign is completely plastic. I wouldn't even own one. This is tired.
It's actually styrofoam.
It's actually just the styrofoam. Yeah, it's not bueno.
So they've got these rotating signs were very, very popular too, and there's just a million inserts for them, and they just spin around and
Yeah, this sign would hang from the ceiling and turns, so it has two sides.
and everything.
This is Angel Island in San Francisco, so this is a Bay Area sign, cool sign.
More of those spinning signs, and again, they're trying to appeal to everybody's things they like.
How Northwest is that?
And these guys might be going down to sheets of.
So here's an example of the 1965 packaging. Again, the new logo, the circular logo, and another innovation by Lucky Lager, the resealable cap, an alcoholic's favorite. Drink some now, save some for later.
Yeah, again, innovation. The twist top. Yep, they were so far ahead of their game on things.
This sign is turquoise, Lucky Lager. We call this a double stroke neon because it's double. This particular sign was made in 1962. Somehow, somewhere, some way it made it to me. And it's the only one ever found. And nobody's ever found this Lucky logo font, lager font, on anything. No product, no bottle, no label, nothing. It never existed, so we just call this a one-off, as sort of a prototype sign. All right, this is an interesting sign. Let's talk about why this sign has scrolls on it. Tyler, this one's yours.
So, well, that's basically what happened was in the state of Montana, they didn't want plain signs. They had to have this pretty scrolling on. That's how we know where it came from, pretty much. What was the?
So they said you couldn't have a sign in a bar unless it was nice. It couldn't be cheap. It had to be fancy. So this is Lucky's version of fancy. A little bit wrought iron, huh?
And again, yeah, that's how we know it's in Montana.
And guess what? They made a lot of them, and there's a lot of varieties, so they're out there. Here's a Lucky Draft. Now this one doesn't have the scroll, so this is the California sign.
And we can tip our toes into the draft and light thing.
Yeah, we'll get to that. So Lucky Light. This is a great story. So in Oregon, we're not in Oregon, thank God, but they have weird laws, right? You think Clark County has weird laws? In Oregon, see the sign says Lucky Draft, right? Well, in the state of Oregon, they said if you put draft beer in a bottle or a can, it's no longer draft beer. So you can't sell it as draft beer. So what did Lucky do? They came out with Lucky Light. Lucky Light was packaged solely for Oregon. That's Lucky Light. Mr. Jake, what do you think of this sign? While I'm at it, I'm going to shout out to Jake here. He came here today from Vancouver, BC, and he brought the Lucky Lager to the today. And incidentally, like I said in the beginning, Lucky Lager started in 1934 in San Francisco and on Vancouver Island. And today, 90 years later, you can still buy the Lucky Lager in Vancouver, Canada. It's a crime you cannot buy in Vancouver, Washington. Thanks, Jake. You cannot buy it here. They will not sell it over the border. In fact, he can tell you that it's like the beer of choice in Vancouver, and they don't want it to go anywhere else. Pretty much. It's the fisherman's beer.
Here's another before Miller right there, Lucky Genuine Draft.
Okay, here's another innovation. So here's the introduction to Lucky Draft. So Lucky Draft, that's what I'm wearing on my shirt. Well, you can see this says Lucky Light. But Lucky Draft was introduced in 1966. This was their really big push to make it like almost the bitter end. But you know, you have Miller Lite, and then you have Miller Genuine Draft. Lucky beat Miller to both of those products. They were very ahead of their time. So the Lucky Draft is like one of my favorite parts of collecting Lucky. I just always liked this brand and this logo, and it's like something I like to collect. If you look at Lucky Draft, they're really pushing the X away. Look how small the X is on that can. You can't even tell it's a Lucky Lager product. So what's happening in the late 60s is Lucky's now becoming a non-premium beer. What happened to Lucky was all the soldiers went off to Vietnam, and when they came home, they didn't want Lucky Lager. They wanted Oli and Coors. So Lucky had a tough time in the 60s. Here, go back one more. So here's an example of a Lucky Light can right here. Lucky Draft, Lucky Light. If you read the fine print on this can, it says, Oregon's most popular packaged light beer. Pretty cool. Here's a Lucky Draft sign. Ugly.
In my way.
They really went hard with this product. As you can see, light, smooth, and marketing non-filling. Where have we heard that before? Miller Lite, right? Well, this was 10 years before Miller Lite. So this sign right here, very cool sign. This is a depiction of Broadway in San Francisco.
You can see the GTO up front there, Jag there.
The Nova.
I've got this sign in both versions, the draft and the light version.
So they really put a lot of money in this brand, and it was really kind of the beginning of the end for Lucky. So some of you might remember King Snedley's. King Snedley's was Lucky's last-ditch effort to get young people to drink beer. King Snedley's was a fantasy fairy tale about you guys know about this, huh? So it was called the Hopland family. They lived in Hopland, and they discovered this beer, and they came out with King Snedley's. It was actually designed by an art class at the University of Hayward in California. So they brought this out right around 1970. And as you're going to see in the next few minutes here, we're getting away from the X altogether, and we're going to change to Tyler's favorite, the Lazy L. So here we go. This is the last era of Lucky Lager, 1970. It's no longer Lucky Breweries. the big guy, Paul Kalmanovitz, we know who that is, right? He ruined our lives. He owned the Meyer Brewing Company in Los Angeles, and he, over the next 30 years, 1970 on, he bought every regional brewery in America and closed it. And when he got to Lucky, people knew what was going to happen. But what he did was, he stopped making Lucky a premium beer. First thing he did was change the logo, changed everything. He started making Lucky in Los Angeles again, which was cool. But his brewery was known for what? Making grocery store beer. So what happened to Lucky General Brewing in San Francisco and Vancouver, the last two breweries, became a company that made beer for quantity and not quality. And they just made beer, and guess what? They made what, 30 different cans, 40 different cans. They made Safeway's beer, they made Albertson's beer, they made Fred Meyer's beer, and then they made generic beer. How much lower can you go? Like, you're just making a can that just says beer. It might as well be like on a TV show, but if you look at it, they were proud of it. It says by Lucky. Light beer by Lucky. And Lucky, they're so innovative, they even made a story about light, L-I-T-E. What does that mean? Who spells light, L-I-T-E? And you know what their terminology was? Well, when we're talking about a light beer and less calories, let's make the word light with 4 letters instead of 5. So they were crazy.
Well, they were saving ink too. Here's another innovation for them. They were some of the first breweries to lean into recycling.
True. So let's look at this again. Go back one slide. So 1970, Lucky Brews sold to Beer Baron Paul Kalmanovitz. Lucky Brews becomes General Brewing. They brought the old name back because they're just a General Brewing now. San Francisco closes their plant in 1978. The Vancouver Brewery is the last surviving brewery, which lasted until 1985. After 1985, Kalmanovitz, who also owned Olympia now, moved production of Lucky to Olympia, 1986. That lasted for a while. They came out with some funky beers. Tried to be like everybody else. So they came out with stuff like Lucky Ice. Let's see what else Lucky Draft. But what they did here, they brought the X back. So this is super cool. This can was made in Tumwater, Washington, 1993. It's about the end of Lucky. So after 1999, Miller bought Olympia. You guys might remember that they made Miller and Olympia for a while. Well, they decided to close Olympia. So when Olympia closed, they moved Miller back to Irwindale, California, which, if you know where Irwindale, California is, it's right across the freeway from Azusa. So Lucky sold their brewery in Azusa to Miller in 1966, and now at the end of their life, when they last brewed Lucky in 2003, Miller was the one making their beer. Crazy. This is a picture of the Lucky Brewery in San Francisco, and this is about, I'd say 1975 maybe. And if you see, the sign just says Lucky Beer. There's no more Lucky Lager. It's coming down. It's downhill. This is our Vancouver brewery. Yeah. Vancouver Dodge. So this is the iconic Lazy L. So the Vancouver brewery was the only Lucky brewery that ever had the new logo on it. So that's kind of cool. And I think a lot of people here in this area relate to this sign, and they remember it. You come across the I-5 bridge and that sign was flashing at night. It was a great sign.
And while we're here, we hear a lot of people always ask, well, where did the sign go? Well, as far as we know, the sign was split into two. Half of it went up to Olympia for a while.
Tacoma, Washington, yeah.
Or Tacoma, and half was maybe in the backyard of somebody from the brewery for a while in Vancouver. The sign, half of the sign did just turn up, what was it, about 3 months ago?
Actually, yeah, last year in an auction in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the Lucky and the beer letters were sold in an auction. They're about 4 feet tall, they're all rusty, no glass on it, but somebody had taken it to the Midwest and it's there, so good to see. Now I'm going to tell you one thing about this logo, because a lot of people hate it or love it. Now, one of the things you gotta know about this logo is if you look at the L, the X is in the L. Did you know that? Pretty clever, right? Here's Smith Tower. Look at Vancouver. Look at the green grass of Vancouver. So, this logo, 1970, was kind of like the changing of the guard, downhill slope, whatever you want to call it. But this lazy L was actually designed by a high school student in Roseburg, Oregon, whose father owned a Lucky distributor in Roseburg. So that's the history of the lazy L. Now these are some examples of the last signs Lucky made. The last signs were around 1970 to 1975. Because when good old Paul bought the brewery, he never spent a penny on advertising. He just made cheap beer and sold it at the cheapest price. No advertising. We don't need no signs. This Lucky Fine beer sign is super rare, and it actually appeared in the movie Dirty Harry.
That, and the sign on the bottom actually was at the brewery. Local collector, I got that from.
So even though their quality went down, they were still trying to call it a fine beer. These are examples of like end of the line cheap advertising, psychedelic stuff, pool table light. Now everybody knows about these decals. So I have a trivia question for you. Anyone in the room, this character guy on these cartoons, do you know what his name was?
I do not have the surfing one.
No, it's not Lucky.
I have the unstuck sticker of the surfer.
So his name was Lucky Larry. And he had a big nose. This is probably one of the last signs they made. Now it's back to it's Lucky we live in the West. Lucky at the Reno Air Races.
That's a decent deal.
How's that? 6 beers for $1.25. That's this right here. Finest of them all. These are some of the last beers they made in San Francisco. So this would be 1977. Another interesting story. So even though Lucky was cheap, I don't know why they did this, but in 1977 they came back with steel cans. When all beer cans and soda cans went to aluminum in about 1970, they came back with these steel cans and they said, we're going to make this beer that's like you remember, old-fashioned beer, it's stronger. So they came out with Lucky Continental Dark, and they came out with the President's beer, Bicentennial. So 1976, they brought out Old George, and then they brought out John Adams. And at the time, I think there was 35 presidents. They ran out of money and they stopped. They only made 2 presidents. It was a great idea, but they didn't get it. Here's another product they made. So this is the 12-pack of cans for $2.49. Made right here in Vancouver, Washington. This is red carpet beer. I don't know if you have the can, but on the can, it tells you that it's great to be an American, it's patriotic, it tells you to buy American, and on this can, it welcomes you home. So this beer was made for the soldiers coming back from Vietnam. Thanks for serving anyone who served. Again, here's Lucky Light again. Well, if you watch golf now, the biggest supporter of golf and athletics is Michelob Ultra Light. So Michelob Ultra Light is the lightest beer you can buy without drinking water. But again, Lucky was so far ahead of everybody. You know, Miller Lite said, what are we? We're 130 calories less than any light beer, right? Than a regular beer. What Lucky said? We have 150 calories, 50% calories less. 68 calories, you might as well drink water. And this is the can, go back one. This is the can that tells you that we spell light with a 4 instead of 5 letters because it's less. So, pretty crazy. Here's that generic beer. These are examples of where Lucky ended. So, they became a supermarket brand. When you, if you worked for Lucky in 1978, all the beer in that factory went into 30 different cans. It was the same beer. There was no more Lucky Lager premium beer. There was no more Lucky Light. There's no more Lucky 96. This is it, just beer. So let's talk about the puzzle caps. Everybody knows about the puzzle caps, right? Make sure you guys get your puzzle caps. We have a lot of them out there. This sign advertises the Lucky Puzzle Caps. This thing was a great thing. Again, so here's the red carpet can. Welcome home. And then, Count Manovitz was like this true American, right? Although he's from Poland. Wake up America. He preached America this, America that, but he closed all the breweries in America. Examples of the last packaging in the 70s. I think the packaging is great, even though I don't like the L. I think it's good packaging. What about this sign, Tyler?
I think this is the last lighting sign ever made by Lucky Lager. On the back of the sign, there's a little white label that says Vancouver 1982. And I've not seen any other, so kind of got a picture, I've not seen any other lighting sign related to Lucky later.
So this is another story. This neon here, I got this from a guy that made this sign in Seattle in 1993. Again, they're trying to relive the past, bring about Lucky Genuine Draft. Even though they were a cheap company, they made this sign just to take the picture to put on this box. So that sign, there's only one, I own it, and they took the picture to put on this box, and somehow, some way, found its way to me. And this is 1993, so this is actually really cool packaging. And if that was in the store today, I would probably pick it up.
So yeah, here's some examples of them bringing the X back as well.
I think this is more for nostalgia than anything. I don't think it was the selling beer.
So yeah, that's pretty much the end of the Vancouver and Tumwater and Azusa era, or Irwindale era. There was some resurgence. So the next picture. So what happened to the Lucky Lager breweries in San Francisco and in Vancouver? Well, they passed all the bits and pieces from the breweries, and they took and put all the bits and pieces onto a ship, and they shipped it to China. And the next picture is a picture of the brewery, the plant being built in Zalpine. That plant was built and still running today with Vancouver Brewery and San Francisco Brewery bits. And actually, this is a picture of my dad. He got into every single one of the tanks and inspected them. So that's another connection. My dad is one of the 5 engineers that went to China and lived there in China while they built that brewery. So pretty fun. And again, here's another connection. This is myself and my 2 brothers. We're getting to the end of the program. We got more to talk about. Actually, my older brother's the good-looking one in the middle right there. And I'm the one with the full diaper on the left. And here's another connection. So, and Pat found this. The Lucky Lager brewery had their employees had an employee little
monthly newsletter.
Yeah, and here's my birth announcement.
So Tyler was having a barbecue. And so I met Tyler around 1999, and he was having a barbecue. He has legendary barbecues. And he says, hey, we're having a barbecue, bring the family over or whatever. And I was going through I have a lot of paper, right? So I'm going through all these Lucky Lager newsletters, and I find this thing. And it says Tyler Castle. And I'm like, really? So I went to his barbecue, and I found his mom, and I said, hey, check this out. And she's like, where in the heck did you find that? I said, I don't know, but it's meant to be, so that's how we got it.
And so Pat and I have been really hard to get Lucky Lager back to the U.S. There was a short point where 21st Amendment Brewery in Northern California, they started making Lucky Lager again. And Pat helped with them on a logo and some other things, and they made the mistake of selling it only in Northern California. If they had sold this in the Northwest, and this is what, 6 years ago?
Yeah, 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, it would have been something. So that was from the 21st Amendment. So right now, we're celebrating 90 years still in Canada. And, some of you may have gotten some of that Canadian beer that Jake brought up to us. So they're still go up there and get it. Any questions or?
Right here, sir.
When did the X go away from the top of the building here?
So the X got changed to the new logo in 1970. So the X actually changed twice because they had a smaller X. I believe the first X went up in like 1939, and then they changed it in like 1945. And then they left the Lucky, they took the lager out, we have the picture, and then you put Lucky beer, and then they put the L in the middle. And I only saw the sign lit in 1986. And to my recollection, it was kind of like pink and blue. I don't think it was really super red. So right here. All the signs were made by sign companies. Yeah, neon sign companies. Most of them were made in Los Angeles or San Francisco.
Speak on the puzzles.
The puzzles? What do you want to know about the puzzles? They probably made 500 different ones.
I got the answer key, and I know I gave April the answer key, and she saw it. She copied it right away because she's kind of nerdy like myself and wants to have that kind of stuff. So yeah.
If anybody would like one, please email me at the museum.
Yeah.
At cchmuseum.org or April at
And the puzzle caps, they were called crown ticklers. That's what they were called. And there's different variations of the cap because they had the blue ones and the white ones and the gray ones. But I think they started in about 1977. And the paper that she has with the solve, the answer is like from number 1 to 100. But they got into the 500s. What I don't understand is for a company that was so cheap, how did they come up with artists to make hundreds of puzzles for them?
But I mean, there's neat stuff like these printing plates. These printing plates printed over 500,000 cards for Lucky Beer in 1950. Just anything we can find, and we're always looking to preserve that history. And it's pretty, Pat, tell us about that right there.
So this is actually pretty unique. This is a Lucky Lager security badge. So it says guard Lucky Lager. I would say it's from the 40s. And I'm pretty sure it's from Vancouver, not San Francisco, because of the logo. But the most interesting about this badge is the number on the badge. So if you have a pretty low number on the badge, it probably means you worked there a while or you were an early employee. Guess what number this badge is? It is, Tyler, tell him what it says.
Looks like number 1 to me.
Number 1.
I think I've seen 3.
Number 1, so it's the very first one.
I've only seen maybe 2 badges ever, or 3 maybe. I think I've seen 3 or 7 or something like that besides that one. And I've been looking for one, and he's got the one.
So you guys watch Storage Wars and shows like that? This was found in a storage in Vancouver. And I saw it on eBay, and I don't know if Tyler told me, but someone told me because I originally had badge number 3. And this is a cute story. So badge number 3, I traded it in 1989 for one of these and one of these. And at the time, I thought those were the 2 coolest Lucky signs ever. And a guy in California had this badge, number 3. And he says, I'll give you those 2 signs for the badge. Well, I traded it. And I can tell you, for 25 years, I regretted it forever. Because those worlds come around. This sign, there's probably 15 or 20 nice ones around. But there was only one of these badges. And I'm like, I am never going to find one. So when I got this badge, the very first thing I did was I called the guy with badge number 3. And I didn't tell him I had badge number 1. I said, Frank, I still want my badge back. What can we do? And he goes, I don't want to get rid of it. I go, it's been 30 years. I'm getting old. I'm never going to find one. And he's like, it's not for sale, it's not for trade. I said, I got a story for you. I said, I just got a badge. And guess what? It's number 1. And he said, that's great because you were never going to get it back.
Pat's got all the good stories too. Let's see, can we run this question?
I'm just curious, does anybody have the recipe?
Yeah, the Pabst Brewing Company. Yeah, so when they did 21st Amendment, that's another thing they did wrong. Lucky was an everyday working man's beer. It wasn't a craft beer. They brought it back as a craft beer. They put Lucky in a 6-pack in boxes, just like, you know, Whitmer or something else, and they tried to get you to pay $10.99 for a 6-pack of Lucky. And it tastes like a craft beer, so I believe they failed.
And we're still working to get them to bring it across the border.
In its heyday, what was the alcohol percent? What would it be similar to today?
4%.
4%.
Yeah, 3-2 beer was really popular in the 70s because they didn't want everybody to get smashed.
Right.
But most breweries made a 3-2 beer for like the baseball games and stuff.
Yeah.
But 4% was the normal.
Okay.
This Canada beer is 5%. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, for the longest time, it was like I'd say, oh, just get a little axe and it'll be pretty close to it. So, well, any other questions? Thank you guys. Thanks for coming. Entertaining Andy Collier, and we're going to be here for a while, and we'd be happy to answer any questions. And if you know anyone who has any Lucky Monterey brewery owner stuff, our club is always interested in that stuff.
Anybody got any grandpa's old signs in the garage?
Let's hear it once more for Pat Tyler here.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Good morning. It's the next day. I've just checked out of my hotel, and I just want to say the presentation that Patrick and Tyler did last night was amazing. Tons of members of the community came out, lots of people that had parents work at the brewery and stuff like that. It was just really cool to see and be involved and just hear people's stories and listen to their questions, and it was just really amazing. So if you're ever in Vancouver, Washington, check out Kiggins Theater. Sweet old building. It's like almost 100 years old, 90 years old or something like that. And we're gonna go check something out that I've only seen pictures of online, and I'm looking at it right now, so I'm gonna show you guys. This mural was commissioned in 2012, I believe, and it's right around the corner from the theater and right up the road from where the brewery was, and it's pretty sweet. Sorry for the noise, we're next to a construction site. So this building here, I believe, was built in the 20s, and this was Lucky's warehouse or storage house. And we've got another mural up here that I believe was commissioned in 2011. And let's have a look at that. So I believe this is where the brewery was. I don't know if this big water tank thing is supposed to be a tribute to it. There's not a plaque on it or anything, but Patrick said it was on the 600 block, and I got to assume it took up all this space here. Couldn't find an address online. Tried to do some Googling this morning, but Columbia and 6th all the way up to the 8th. Maybe someone can confirm in the comments. And here we are on Vancouver's waterfront, which you can't really see right now, but see that bridge in the distance there. And these are something that I've only seen online, but I've been wanting to check out for a while. That's pretty cool. It's kind of dark. I'll see if there's a plaque around somewhere maybe, but these things are all over. I don't know if the camera will see, but there's one over there, a couple there. It's pretty cool to see. All right, time to go home. Back to Canada.
Because a regular size can or two of Lucky Light Draft doesn't fill you up like other beers, the brewers are developing a larger package. The 1,200,000 ounce can. It will be out as soon as they develop the Easy Carry 6-pack.
Lucky beer, premium beer, Lucky premium beer, so lively, get lucky, swing to exciting beer flavor.
Finest ingredients, aged for flavor. That's Lucky Lager, flavor that's entertaining, enthusiastic, a very exciting beer.
Lucky beer, premium beer, Lucky premium beer.
And after a few hour drive, I'm back in Canada, where the Lucky Lager flows from the mountains. Currently just sitting at the ferry in Delta. Happy to be home. First of all, I would like to thank Patrick and Tyler for putting together and executing an amazing presentation. I think that everyone really enjoyed it. I'd also like to thank the Vancouver Downtown Association and the Clark County Historical Museum and the Kiggins Theater for making this all happen. Yeah, what a great event, what a great night. Everyone was so stoked and had lots of questions and wanted to check everything out. And yeah, can't say enough great things about it. If there's anyone from Labatt's or InBev watching, I've got a question for you. What's it going to take to get Lucky Lager back in the US? I mean, even just Washington, Oregon, California. I mean, these guys sold out a theater in a small town, and I can guarantee that they could do that anywhere along the West Coast. People really miss this beer down there. You already sell a bunch of other Canadian beer down there, so what's one more? I mean, there's plenty of people, still alive that remember it or worked there and stuff like that, and I think it would just be a huge hit. So anyways, if you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching. Give it a thumbs up or leave a comment for Labatt's and InBev to bring it back. And yeah, thanks again.
Lucky beer, premium beer, Lucky premium beer.